We're now getting ready for our roundtable that will address issues that are so current and so present in our lives. Recently, I was talking to a friend about someone who, after battling a loss of a family member, gave into depression. And each and every one of us probably can identify a member of our family, a friend or a friend of a friend, who is or have been dealing with at least one of the following problems: anxiety, depression, addiction, eating disorder, and more. Let's learn how we, immortal spirits, can understand health in a broader dimension, and how spirit and body are parts of the same equation. We introduce Mark Smith, who will be the moderator of the roundtable entitled Balancing Physical and Mental Health to Achieve Wellness.
Mark Smith is a member of the Spiritist Society of Virginia and the Spiritist Group of Washington, D.C., where he helps to coordinate the youth programs. Mark has a doctorate in education from the University of Delaware and has worked in education research, teacher training, and English as a second language programs. Let's welcome Mark.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here. What we're going to do is start calling each speaker one by one to introduce their topics. And after all is done, we're going to start immediately asking some questions, kind of getting an interactive approach to this session. Let me introduce our first speaker, Dr. Vanessa Anseloni, to talk about a bridge to hope, mental health under the light of spirituality. Vanessa Anseloni is a neuroscientist and a psychologist. She's a fifth-generation Spiritist, and this is her local community. She's the founder and former president of the Spiritist Society of Baltimore, currently the president of the Spiritist Society of Virginia, and the Spiritist Group of Washington, D.C. She's co-author of the book The New Generation with Divaldo Franco, editor-in-chief of the Spiritist magazine, and the founder of Kardec Radio. Let's welcome Vanessa.
It's so good to be with friends, because we're there feeling like nothing is happening. We're just getting together. No, but it's serious, of course. But it doesn't need to be that serious. It needs to be live, living serious, right? Because when we talk about mental illness, we're talking about many things that need adjustment. In this session, with my friends, Giulio Carvalho and Louise Lima, Mark Smith, and all of you, we cannot start talking about mental illness from a Spiritist perspective without talking about a central figure in the topic, in the study of mental illness, Dr. Boozer de Menezes, right? Let me just ask. So, okay. In this book, not yet in English. That's a secret, okay? Not yet in English. Unlike hundreds of other books, right, Jussara? Yeah, but that's a must. Dr. Boozer de Menezes discarnated in 1900. So he's a man of the 18th century. When he wrote this book, himself, a physician, a spiritist, a good politician, he talked about mental illness in such a way that it would be still at the frontier of what we are practicing nowadays on the earth. Unbelievable. Well, he tells us quite clearly, in several cases, in a very scientific way, we would say, in this book, Mental Illness or Madness Under the Spiritist View. he says to us about how he verifies that there's much more than the physical into mental illness. We don't want to be simplistic. I only have 7 minutes, so it's more a teaser and advertising than anything else. But seriously, it's just to give you some tools so we can study together with our colleagues. We're going to continue on the topic and more as we go back home. He talks about the case of a medical student, Raul Couto. Like many students nowadays, as a university teacher, I came across several similar cases, and it has been happening all the more. He was a wonderful student, medical student, and suddenly he started having suicidal thoughts. He stopped. He put a pause on his studies, and for 2 years he was kept in his room while his family was keeping an eye on him, making sure that he would stay alive. Somewhat they verified that the origin of that imbalance, we would say, was in the beyond, says Dr. Boozer de Menezes in that way. So it was brought to his attention, to Dr. Boozer de Menezes and his group in Rio de Janeiro. Raul Couto was a medical student of the Federal University in Rio de Janeiro, a reputable university. And he comes with his family, and in the Spiritist Center, where Dr. Boozer de Menezes was, practicing Spiritism, they address in Mediumistic meeting the case. And what do they find out? That there is a spirit who wants to avenge him, as he did to his father, who committed suicide. For that spirit, it wasn't enough to make his father quit life. He wanted the son, because they were involved as a family. They talk, Dr. Boozer de Menezes describes how talking, counseling, the spirit counseling through the mediums operated a change. The spirit was rescued, was taken to the spiritual hospital, and he tells us about the timing of the communication, the rescuing, and where Raul Couto was with his family and the changes soon after. And he says, we have clear evidence because that this was not a physical illness. It's a spiritual illness that is impacting on the physical. It's obsession to the level of subjugation. There are 3 levels. So he says, he's better now. He then later went back to his studies, graduated, so on and so forth. So we get to know through Dr. Boozer de Menezes and many other studies throughout the last century and almost 2 decades in the 21st century, that Spiritism really can address the roots of illnesses in general, whether mental or not. And André Luiz, in the book Evolution into Worlds, he's going to explain to us chapter 19, part 2. He's going to say that the susceptibility to illnesses in general begin when we make a grave mistake, because it's going to impact the perispirit. And you may be asking how. Okay, so let's go one more step deeper into this. In the formation of that illness, he says, when we make a grave mistake, that creates a nodule of vibratory disturbance in the spiritual body. The remembrance of that mistake is going to make it continue vibrating in that direction, creating almost like what we would say a knot. And by creating a knot, what happens then? we need to flush it out. What is the way out? Reincarnation. You may be asking, what is the way out? Our friends are going to continue in that direction, but we're going to start stepping into the therapeutics. What is it? Emmanuel, chapter 10 of the book Thought and Life. He says clear-cut to us, if you want to get rid of the shackles of the past, seek the good, feel the good, visualize the good, and mold the good with all the resources you have at hand. Like a child, I'll leave you with this analogy. A child, when she's little, sometimes she's fascinated or scared about her shadow, but the shadow doesn't exist. Emmanuel wisely says, don't look at the shadow. Look at the light. Connect to the light. Drive yourself to the light. As he says often in all of his books, press on towards the light and you'll be set free. Thank you.
Wow, we just have a taste of that and it's over. But luckily there's a question and answer period coming shortly. So now we're going to introduce Louise Lima, whose talk is entitled Accepting Life Unconditionally. Louise Lima was born and raised in Brazil. In 1990, he moved to the United States, where he began his journey in Spiritism. He's a renowned lecturer in the Spiritist movement and participates in local and national seminars and events all year long. And he holds a degree in electrical engineering and works in the computer industry. Luiz?
That's an interesting topic, right? Accepting life unconditionally. So the question that comes to me is, who puts the conditions? Right? Think about it. Who puts the conditions? Who makes them? It comes from the past. It doesn't come from above. It comes from within. When I was a child, I used to love to receive presents and gifts. We all do, I think. I still do myself, personally. And at times we get a gift from someone. It doesn't necessarily mean somebody very important to us, not important. We just get a gift from time to time that we really don't like the gift. And we look at it and we say, I really don't like this thing. And we complain, some sort of complaint. And then we go, well, I wish this person would have done something different, give me something. I needed this so much and I didn't get it. So it happens at times. But when we give somebody a gift, we might be doing the exact same thing, right? I can be invited to let's say a party, a birthday party, and I'm gonna give this particular person a present. And I go to a store, I look at it and say, well, this is a beautiful thing. It fits well for me, it's so nice for me. Then I go to the party, I give this person a present, and this person doesn't like it, or won't like it. I might not even know about it if I don't get told. So we at times we do the same thing. Now, think about this. What if I am the one given the gift? So I go to the store and I buy this gift, and I'm gonna give it the gift. But the receiver is myself. That would be a little bit complicated, because the parameters now are different. The way that we judge the act of going into, let's say, a store and buying the present, that changes everything. Because now I'm giving myself a present knowingly. So you see that there's two things here happening. One is the way we want to do things and the way we did things that will come back to us. So the conditions in life were presents that we gave ourselves, but not in this lifetime necessarily. It's a long, long, long process of life after life after life with repeated mistakes, new mistakes, a variation of old mistakes. We keep doing the same thing. We keep buying the same present all the time. When the receiver receives the present down the road, it doesn't like it. And then what do? How can I return? Some people return life. Unfortunately, shouldn't happen, but it does. It's a reality in our society. So if we are thinking of a future life, if we go beyond the grave, we don't want to get bad gifts anymore or gifts that we don't really like anymore. So I need to start buying different kinds of gifts. I need to invest differently on how I buy my gifts. Life is a gift. Life is a gift. And the life that I have today is a gift that I bring from a combination of things that I did in the past. And if I'm coming here to this life to repeat the very same mistakes that I did in the past, my future is going to be exactly as my present, with no changes whatsoever, not a bit. Because that's what I'm doing today. I'm repeating things from the past. So I'm buying the same gift all the time. I'm re-gifting myself. That's almost like paradoxical, but we do that a lot. And that's why we're here. Because we need to learn to stop doing this. It's not easy, of course. It's a process. It will take a long, long, long time to get rid of old habits and old things that we did and things that we recognize. Some of them we do recognize today. I did this, I shouldn't have done. Some of the things that we did and we are sorry for, per se, are within this lifetime. It could have been something, say, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and I clearly recognize that these things should not have taken place in my life. But then we got to change that. And reconciling with the difference, with these things in the past, the difference, making a difference, seeking the past and pulling out the things that I don't want. I'm not going to re-gift that myself. I'm going to change the gift. I'm going to change the things I buy, and I'm going to, down the road, give it to somebody. And there's another thing that I can do to understand life unconditionally, which is every time somebody gives me something good, I can pay back. That's nice, very nice, that's good. But I can pay forward, right? Sometimes we don't have access for whatever reason. We can't get in touch with the person who gave us whatever we think needs a payment back. When we can't do this, then we could pay forward to another person. It doesn't really matter who. They don't have to be related. But we can go even beyond, which is pay forward but way in the future, which is investing in something now that somebody down the road in the lineage is going to pick up, and that somebody is going to be myself. 3 generations from here, 7 generations from here, maybe 2. Depends. We don't know. So I can do this. I can pay forward. I can pay myself forward. Now, in order to do all of this, Peter said that very well. There's one little thing, one condition, that's the only condition that we should care about, which is humility, humbleness. If I'm not humble enough to understand all of this and do all of this, I'm not going to get anywhere. I'm not paying forward, I'm re-gifting. So that's what we should all be doing. Thank you very much.
Wow, am I re-gifting myself? I have to think about that one. Put that on my mirror in the morning or something. Now let's welcome Giulio Carvalho, whose talk is entitled Insights into Mediumship and Psychiatric Disorders. Giulio Carvalho first encountered the Spiritist doctrine when he was about 14. Since then, he's become an active participant in the United States Spiritist movement. He's co-founded the Spiritist Center Divine Light in Newark, New Jersey, which he coordinates with a group of friends, and has become a prolific speaker, disseminating the Spiritist message, not only in the tri-state area, but also in the Union County, New Jersey jail where he works as a mental health counselor. Let's welcome Giulio Carvalho.
I am so happy to be here. It's only once a year that we get to see one another. And it fulfills my heart with joy that we are so few and we need to cherish our bondings so much. Thank you so much for all of you who are here physically, because I have heard some people saying, I'll be there in spirit. We have enough spirits. We need bodies over here. Probably they don't know how important it is for us to receive support. Good causes need support. When we go and watch a movie and it's violent in nature, we are supporting an evil cause. Goodness must be supported. At times, I also hear some people argument that the reason why they don't come to this or that event, it's because they don't like certain speakers or they don't like certain participants of the movement, forgetting that they are not supporting a group of people, they're supporting a cause. And if you're not here because of someone, you're not supporting the cause. Because all of us, we are passengers of life. And very soon, we're all going to flee the train of life. But the institution, the Spiritist Federation of United States of America, that will remain. And this is what you're here for. You're supporting that cause. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for being here, and all the volunteers who are doing a great job in order to make this event happen. We usually have very strong muscles in our tongue to criticize without realizing that those same muscles need to be very strong to realize goodness as well. So if you haven't received the picture yet that I am supporting you for being here, here comes again. Thank you so much for being here. And please come on the following ones, because we're trying to spread the Spiritist message. So now I have 3 minutes left to cover the very simple topics of mediumship and the psychiatric disorders. The psychiatric disorders, they are very studied by our scientists. And in order to diagnose someone with a psychiatric disorder, they use a manual. And that manual has become thicker and thicker throughout the years. What that means, it doesn't matter how you regard yourself. If you open that book, you will identify yourself with some type of disorder. And I'm sure they will have a medication just right for you. A medication that would not solve your problem, but will make sure that you're dependent on that medication forever, so you can guarantee the business of the pharmaceutical company to go on. After this, I'm waiting for the police to arrest me. This is the Diagnostic Statistic Manual, and it breaks down the psychiatric disorders into different clusters. So you have clusters A, B, and C. Cluster A are disorders of the personality, paranoid and schizoid, schizotypal disorders. Cluster B are disorders of the personality as well. You have antisocial personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, histrionic personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder. Have you identified some of your relatives in one of these categories? And then cluster C, that includes obsessive compulsive disorders. The interesting thing is, most of these disorders, there are no physical way to identify them. There is no phlebotomist that can draw blood from you, put your blood under the microscope, and say, well, I can detect here that you have some narcissistic cells in you. I can detect under this microscope, I can draw this fluid from you and see that you have bipolar, you have depression. Most of these diagnoses are based on measurements that it's subjectively given, which means if your psychiatrist has some disorders of his own, he will diagnose you through the lenses of his own mental illnesses. There are some theories that in the brain, some ventricles are larger than normal, and that will cause schizophrenia. But it's just a theory that is not consistent with all the cases of schizophrenia. According to Spiritism, all of our diseases, they have a cause, and it's a spiritual cause. And that cause has to do with things that we have done towards other people. Most of us don't realize how powerful and destructive it is, guilt. Guilt destroys us from inside out. And when we are not punished for our wrongdoings, we punish ourselves through mental disorders. My 7 minutes are up. Thank you.
Wow, I feel like we got a taste of quite a lot there to chew on in just a short period of time. I suppose one question that we talked a little bit about some of the causes of mental illness, and I just wondered if all of you could kind of elaborate a little bit more on what you think. We're in the Spiritist tradition, we have the notion of obsession. How does that compare with the notion of mental illness? What's the connection between the two? How can we explain what is it that we can offer the mental health community that the mental health community doesn't know about?
All right, so I don't think anything because I'm not a researcher on this. Spiritism is a science, so we're going to borrow to explain this, the concepts that exist in the literature. We are not here to say my opinion, but what is in the literature, beginning from the beginning. Chapter 23 of the Medium's book, Obsession. Kardec addresses right there that we may, it's so common that he said common obsession. There are 3 levels. We are influenced by other people. What is obsession? It's this negative, it's a persistent negative influence of a spirit over another. That's the definition. It can be from an incarnate to an incarnate, and actually this happens more often than we imagine, says Emmanuel in the book Thought in Life, in the very chapter 23 in the book Thought in Life. It's not a coincidence because they are from the same team. They prepared it, 23 in the Medium's book, 23 in the Thought in Life. Obsession. And Emmanuel says, majority of cases is an incarnate to incarnate. It's when we think of somebody and we say, oh, that person. Okay, mental dart. Oh, no. And then every day, and every day, or every other day, or every other week, but we are obsessing somebody. So the question we often ask is if we're not being the obsessors of somebody. But as Julio said quite well, we cannot enter the guilt trip because that's going to paralyze ourselves. So it's not on us to come here and push that button and say, we're bad, we're bad. No, no, no. Seeking the good. What is the good? What is the hope, as Mark is bringing to us? Inevitably, the mind creates life. Mind creates life. Multidimensionally. Spirit, spiritual body, which is semi-matter, perispirit, and then physical body. When science tells us, as a neuroscientist myself, when science says to me, well, schizophrenia is hereditary, depression is da-da-da, okay, we're not going to dispute it. But we as a spiritists, we're going to say, the body didn't create it. The body is expressing the impression of an imbalance that happened before this life. It could be created in this life too. But it was created before. Through the genes, the impression of the mold, the mind of the spirit, through the envelopment, the perispirit, it creates that impression. There is a whole mechanism on the behind the scene. There is a book by Divaldo Franco that talks quite well about it, how we attract that gene pool that is going to express that imbalance, okay? But overall, we're going to conclude that there is hope. If I see a child who is autistic, a patient who is schizophrenic, somebody who is going through pathological depression, because sadness, nowadays people are like, I'm depressed. Don't go by taking pills just because of a temporary situation. We're talking about psychiatric illnesses that characterize as mental illnesses. They need a multidimensional approach, but it begins in the mind. That's where Spiritism is offering the help and the hope. Because we come and say, talk as Professor Eurípides Barçanufo, the most complete Spiritist medium accord that has ever incarnated, according to Chico Xavier. He had a straight connection with Jesus, Mother Mary, and the whole 9 yards of the good spirits. And Dr. Boozer de Menezes, after discarnating, prescribed homeopathy through him in Sacramento, Minas Gerais, Brazil. And he brings us the approach that can bring us hope. We're talking about immortality, and he says it's a spirit-to-spirit approach. People think that it's only about children when he talks about spirit-to-spirit approach. It's not. It's when I look at the patient who is suffering in a coma or who is in the mental hospital, and I say, you, Spirit X, eye to eye, even if they don't understand or don't respond, or respond in ways that are chaotic, at random, we look at them and say, you're a child of God. You know the song, right? It's not only for children. You are a child of God. You are a child of God. You've reincarnated to learn to do good. Remember that? Easy. Easy. You're a child of God. I love and approve of myself. Self-approval. There is no way for us to conquer. All the studies in positive psychology and current neuroscience through neuroimaging proves to us that the way to go is exactly what Emmanuel said in 1958 when he wrote Thought and Life, same year that the book Evolution in Two Worlds was published. André Luiz, through two mediums, Chico Xavier and Valdo Vieira, saying, we need to reprogram our minds to approve of ourselves. That's the best way to praise God, to appreciate our divine. And we need to talk spirit to spirit. To ourselves, if you have your bags, you got a cardiac radio pocket mirror. You know why? For this exercise. Look at yourself and say, I am a child of God, and I I love and approve of myself in ways that are pleasing to God. There is no way to love ourselves if we don't love God. That's the good news.
Yeah, Luis, you had a lot to say about accepting life unconditionally.
Right.
And I just wonder what your thoughts are on what Vanessa said. And you also asked an interesting question about a turning point in accepting ourselves unconditionally. That might be interesting to talk about too here.
Yeah, turning point would be that aha moment, right? So when does it come? When is the aha moment? First of all, I don't know when it's coming, in principle. But on the other hand, sounds paradoxical, only I have control over that. It's my choice, it's my own choice to define from this point on, I need to stop doing what I was doing, I'm gonna change, I'm gonna do things different, I'm gonna act differently, I'm gonna do things that will not hurt people like I did in the past. It's a new avenue that we open. And in order to reconcile these things, these two sides of before and after the turning point, we need to detach from the past. Because if we don't detach, we're still in the past. Detaching from the past means going through our inventory of beliefs first, and our inventory of emotions. And then we go down, just like an inventory. Right? Just go, make your inventory. And if you want to go even further, you can write down the quantities. For example, selfishness, 200. And then, I don't know, maybe rage, 10. Because we know we are more of this and less of that. So you can build up your own inventory. When you look at your inventory right in front of you, then it's a matter of choosing how to come about this. What am I going to do first? What am I going to do next? Or what combination of things am I going to do? That would be my aha moment. The turning point is having in front of me, clear in front of me, what I've been and what I'm not going to be anymore.
Julio, you talked a little bit about much more severe cases of mental illness, right? And I wonder what you could elaborate on about how to help those who may be dealing with, schizophrenia. What could be done to help either to help someone or to help them heal themselves?
He asked, how can we help someone with mental illness? Mm-hmm. Well, if you are a practitioner, the advice will be to look at the body not as the cause of the problem, but just the effect. And usually, scientists, because they deny the existence of something beyond matter, and when I say scientists, I refer to the scientific community. There are certain individuals who are scientists that believe in immortality, but the scientific community as a whole does not. So science as a community does not prove immortality. Scientists, individuals, they do. And when that community of scientists will come to understand that the body is the effect and not the cause, they will start treating the cause of the problem and not the effect. The best knowledge will be if someone is having problems with their car, and the life of the car is supposed to be for 10 years, but every 3 years they have to change their car because there's a problem with the car. So they take the car to the mechanic, and the mechanic will say, well, your brakes are wearing out too fast. There's a problem with your battery. There's a problem with your alternator, with your starter. There's a problem with your transmission. And why do you have all these problems here? I think there's too much gas going to your engine. The car is going too fast. They're constantly talking about the car as if the car is an entity by itself. And the car is just the machine. The car is not the driver. So our body here is just the car. The spirit is the driver of the car. And whatever the spirit is feeling will transmit to the car. And as long as we keep fixing the car without changing the driving style of the driver, there would not be too much improvement. Now, if we're speaking to someone who is not a practitioner, what should you do to help someone with a mental illness? Well, give them love. And by giving them love, it's not necessarily feeling the sentiment of love, but treating them with tenderness and care. Because although they could not express their emotions the way we do, that does not mean they don't feel what we feel. They do. Autistic children, schizophrenic individuals, they know exactly who treats them good and who mistreats them. And that creates a barrier for their own inner healing, because love is a changing factor. And by them receiving love from other people, it helps them to love themselves as well. So the best thing that you can do as a relative, as a friend, is to provide them with love. And if you have any sort of confidence in your relationship, you can definitely present this knowledge. The Spiritist philosophy will bring them comfort, resilience. It would not remove the problem. We are the ones who remove the problem by applying the knowledge into our lives. To know is not exactly to do. I know there's a lot of people who struggle with their weight, especially after lunchtime that took longer than usual. Now, you can read all the magazines and watch all the movies and hear all the lectures on losing weight. Would that make you lose weight? What that means, we could spend 100,000 years listening to our own lectures over and over again. Would that make us better people? No. It will make us more informed, but not better. How can we get better? By putting these teachings into practice.
Yeah.
And that's how we liberate ourselves from our own problems.
Yeah. This is a question going back to Vanessa. Members of the family, of course, are involved in the sense, in the production of a mental illness. Of course, at a Spiritist perspective, we understand that it goes back further than just this lifetime. So, how do members of a family get to be involved in that? And what is our role if we are in a family with someone who has a mental illness?
So, first of all, a book to illustrate Obsession by Manuel Filomeno de Miranda through Divaldo Franco. That book illustrates how a family is completely involved in the mental illness of anybody who is in that family. We don't make mistakes alone, bottom line. If André Luiz says that we become susceptible to the triggering of illnesses because of grave mistakes, we never, ever make mistakes alone. Even a mass shooter in a school. They have partners in 2 realms. And then we have to reincarnate to redeem ourselves. And we come with our susceptibilities. So if I have, nowadays I'm going to talk about, a family member who is undergoing depression, whether a spouse or child or sister or a brother or a more distant relative, there is a reason why I'm connected to that child of God as well. What can I do? What can I do? Though I don't feel the same, I cannot wash my hands like Pontius Pilate and allow the person to be carrying that cross without getting my involvement. That's the action of love. I need to engage in the healing process. Where does it begin? With ourselves. And I'll say this, of all things, and we will repeat, if you study childhood in one life, you see lots of our problems begin right there. Right there. Because we learn that we are inadequate. Quite often we say, no, 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 that's not good, that's wrong, that's not good, that's not. And then we grow thinking that we're not adequate, that we're not good enough. Paula Schmidt is a child psychotherapist, and she's living proof because she works with children and parents. And if we don't work with the root cause of it all, which is the mind, we won't change it. So the love begins by thinking good things. As Emmanuel said, seek the good in that situation. Seek the good. How can it be good, Vanessa? My child is suicidal. Well, if God and the high spirits are allowing you and the whole family to go through this, there is an alarm ringing and saying, people, pay attention to what is priority. And priority is not sending the other kids to Harvard or buying the next house, the next car. And I hear parents telling me quite often, but I can't stop my work to take care of this child. Okay. Then you wait next reincarnation. In one reincarnation, you're going to have to stop your life to go back and learn the lesson that you don't want to learn. We need to be good students of life. And the lesson is only one. Love. To love.
Yeah. How do we teach our children to accept life unconditionally?
That's an interesting question. First of all, they gotta be educated at the spiritual level, not academic education. Education at the spiritual level. That means they have to understand themselves and they'll position themselves in a society as spirits, immortal spirits. Susanna was just saying here before, we know we are immortal spirits, but do we live as immortal spirits? That's something they need to be taught. Us too. That doesn't exclude any of us here. So that would be one of the things that we need to do. These children have to, for example, Spiritist centers. We have the youth, we have the children's education, the very basic level. That's how they start. You can't start at 20, 21 years old because they would be already contaminated by whatever is their surroundings, their family, their cultural level, whatever it is. So the values have to be clear from the get-go. And we can only do this, address this through education. And the other thing is, us looking at them as children today, they will be governor of a planet or a galaxy one day. So we should treat them as that, instead of just showing the wrong things, don't do this, don't do that. Okay, don't do this for a reason, but let's give them the right reason with decency and treat them well and guide them over to the right avenue. Don't do this because there's an explanation. Here's the explanation. Make sense of this, and now you follow this way. So addressing these values and treating them as they are, as immortal spirits that one day are going to be governors of planets and galaxies is probably the answer to this.
Julio, do you think a person with a mental illness should go seek out a Spiritist center, mediumistic meeting?
If someone with mental illness should seek a mediumistic meeting? Yes, that's the question.
Yeah.
First of all, what is a mediumistic meeting? Now, for those of you who are looking at me, come on, we've been to the Spiritist Center many times, we know. But this event is directed towards those that have absolutely no idea what we're talking about here. So we try to break down the information to small bits so they understand what we are all about. A mediumistic meeting is a meeting at a Spiritist center where those that have been practicing Spiritism, in other words, making an effort to change themselves, they have balance and they struggle to better themselves, they participate in these meetings to contribute. In these meetings, a psychotherapeutic session will take place in which a spirit will use a medium in order to relate their problems. And someone that acts as a psychotherapist will talk to explain to the spirit, through the medium, the reasons why they should forgive. Those who come to the mediumistic meetings, the spirits that manifest themselves through the mediums, are usually spiritual obsessors who are seeking vengeance with their own hands. The individual that comes to our center with all sorts of problems, that's someone who can be persecuted by a spirit. And this individual, who we can see with our physical eyes, the sick individual that arrives at the Spiritist Center, he or she is not the victim. This is someone who actually harmed the spirit that now is their spiritual obsessor. And because the spiritual obsessor wants to seek justice with their own hands, they are harming that individual through obsession, through the persistence, negative actions to harm that individual. Now, if someone has schizophrenia, or they are suffering from a bipolar disorder, or they're autistic, and they have some psychotic symptoms which resembles what we call mediumship. A medium is someone that has the ability to see, hear, and feel spirits. Well, we all do. We all are mediums in one level or the other. But we usually refer to mediums those that have these capacity more exacerbated. They can easily hear, see, and feel spirits. Those are individuals that after they have struggled to better themselves, they participate in a mediumistic meeting. Someone that has schizophrenia and bipolar might present those same features. They can see, hear, have visual, auditory hallucinations, yet they have no inner balance. So it will be a complete act of irresponsibility taking that disturbed, emotional, sick individual to a mediumistic meeting, thinking that let's allow this individual to channel all the spirits that are obsessing him, because then we're going to heal him. And it doesn't happen. And unfortunately, there is this trend in the Spiritist movement that if you are seeing things and hearing things, you must be taken immediately to a mediumistic meeting. And they're doing a great error to this individual because they have no psychological strengths in order to understand what's going on. Now they will even have a stronger connection with their spiritual obsessor who will do great harm.
Yeah, Vanessa, would you like to elaborate a little bit more on that as well? Because I think that this issue Julio's raising is really important, and it highlights the difference, right, between Spiritism, which is a science, as you were talking about, and perhaps people that dabble, in spirituality and in mediumship.
I would just vouch for everything that Julio said. He quoted passages from the Spiritist literature, the basics of it all. And we can't forget, I would just add one extra element that is not lacking, but just to reinforce it all, which would be something that Luiz mentioned here about the emotional component. When we study ourselves as our nature, because we can't forget Spiritism is a science that studies the origin, the nature, and the destiny of spirits and the relationship with the corporeal world, us. So we are here studying ourselves. And when we study ourselves, we get to know, and throughout the literature at Kardec and later through Chico Xavier, specifically Emmanuel, the spirit author of Thought and Life. And why am I repeating Thought and Life? Just a parenthesis. Because that book came about as short guidelines for those who want to succeed in a reincarnation, bottom line. 30 chapters, very straightforward. So if people are like, I don't have a manual, they do. My spouse doesn't have a manual, they do. You have a manual, your children have a manual. Read it. And there we have a summary of it all, says Emmanuel. And in that summary, he reports to us as we are vibrating spirits, and he quotes from Kardec. Kardec asked the spirits, can you tell us what is a spirit? He said, well, for lack of better terms, let's say it's a flame. So you're a flame. Think of yourself as a flame. When you look at yourself in the mirror, you're not seeing yourself, you're seeing the body. I'm seeing the body. So look at yourself in the eyes, the soul, deep into the soul. And we as the flame, we vibrate according, first of all, how we're feeling. And that's pushing, says Emmanuel, what we think. It's right there, chapter 1, thought is life. He says to us, as I feel, I think. As I think, I create habits and then my life, character and life. 1958. Right there, we get to know that we need to take care of our emotions. When we talk about mental illnesses, we're talking about crystallizations of emotions. And we can't take a person that is barely dealing with emotions to a meeting that is very emotional. It's loaded with emotions. And only Spiritism, may I say this way, has, as Mark asked us to talk about spirituality in the broader view of the word, Spiritism brings a framework that is unique to deal with mediumship. And one thing we know, we need to first know ourselves to safely educate ourselves into mediumship. When we are undergoing a cold, we don't go to the battlefield. If you have a flu, you don't go to work, hopefully. You heal and don't spread the germs, right? Ideally. If you are going through a tough phase that is characterized as mental illness, you don't go to the work of mediumship because we are not either shielded or at service to do that type of work. So we need to work on our emotions first. So we vouch for self-awareness. It's in the Spirit's book by Allan Kardec, written in 1855. We need to search for whom we are, secure to be at service in a mediumistic meeting.
Hey, Luis, would you mind having the last word here, because we're running out of time? I see over there they're starting to. You talking about accepting life unconditionally. We're here in Washington, D.C. We're in a socio-political climate that, let's face it, has been better in various times or another, if only because of the discourse of the way people talk to each other these days. And what's a message you'd like us to take home with about how to live our lives, how to be good?
Yeah, at times it's difficult when you watch the news and see everything going on, and it becomes very difficult. It's more challenging for certain people than some others, but it's always possible. I think there's two things to consider. First of all, is something that Spirit Emmanuel makes it very clear to us. Revolt is a synonym of incomprehension. If we don't understand something, we revolt. So let's go the other way around. When I revolt, stop. Stop. Okay, I'm revolting. All right, stop. Let me try to understand why. You might take a day, you might take 3 lifetimes, but revolting is not the answer. That's one thing. And number 2, I would say, when we go out there and we look at the news, we can always pick up good stuff out of bad news. Yeah. Always. We had an interesting news this past week. I don't know if you guys follow the news, but there was a plane coming from New York City to Dallas, and they had some trouble midair. One of the engines exploded, and can you imagine being inside that plane? It wouldn't be nice. It would be very complicated. So the oxygen masks come down, they lose altitude at an incredible rate. So time goes by, and everybody inside the plane is like, well, that's it. So there's a lot of screaming, a lot of revolt. Then there's this one guy, and he says, okay, let me stop and think what I'm gonna do here. revolting is not the case. All right, so I would like to tell my wife and my kids that I love them. I would like this and this. So he puts a little strategy together, and he doesn't have time. Things is happening right there. And then he said, okay, in order for me to do this, the only way to do this is through the internet. I can't do anything else. So he picks up his phone calmly, because he made himself calm first. He understood what was happening. So he picks up his phone and said, for me to go to the internet, I have to sign up to Wi-Fi. He signed up to Wi-Fi. The plane was falling. He signs up, fills out the form, puts a credit card number in. He has to sign up to use the Wi-Fi. And ended up costing $8, but he had to sign up. Then, by using the internet, he goes on Facebook and posts a message. Actually, a video. It was a video. So he kind of recorded himself live, and gracefully, the plane didn't crash or anything like that. We just lost one soul, one life. But then, that news is not out there. It's not out there. Everything else is wrong with the plane, everything else is wrong with the news, but that's not there. So it's always possible to pick up great stuff from even bad news. And that's how we grow, by picking the good stuff, not the bad stuff. Picking up the bad stuff attaches to the past, so it doesn't let us grow.
Okay, well. We ought to